This Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, I wanted to share some of the stories and perspectives of people who've helped me throughout my own diagnosis. I'm delighted to share today an interview with Dr. Susana Banerjee, consultant medical oncologist and research lead of gynaecological cancers at the Royal Marsden NHS Foundation Trust. She's also a reader in women's cancers at the Institute of Cancer Research, and lucky for me, is my own oncologist as well. In this interview, Susana shares more about what her life as an oncologist is like and what gives her great hope in the fight against ovarian cancer. Susana, welcome. Thank you again for your time. Perhaps we could start today by hearing a bit about your background and what led you to oncology.
Thank you for arranging this. It's going to be so meaningful, you sharing your stories. So where did it all start? My father was a surgeon. He's retired now. My older sister, she was a junior doctor at the time when I was torn as a teenager about career pathways. But I saw firsthand from both my father and my sister how meaningful it could be being a doctor, treating and helping patients. So at 18, I embarked on studying medicine at Cambridge University, and somehow I managed to graduate with a first class, which was great. And I completed my clinical studies then at Royal Free Hospital in the University of London. And I qualified as a doctor in 2000. And it was a really exciting time being a new doctor at the start of the millennium. Very hopeful about the future and what we could do for patients nationally and around the world. Part of my junior doctor rotations, which is going to work in various hospitals and different specialities, I was allocated to an oncology job for 3 months. And within the first 3 days, I knew that I wanted to dedicate my further medical specialisation treating and caring for patients with cancer. And I was really lucky to be selected as a junior doctor, what we called an SHO or senior health officer at the time, at the Royal Marsden in Chelsea. And that was back in 2003. And interestingly, it was actually, I was a junior doctor on the team of gynaecological cancers in medical oncology. And that is the exact team that I have been a consultant for now for over 10 years. I took time out of my training programme to study for a PhD, which was at the Institute of Cancer Research. It was actually in breast cancer. So I was very lucky having great scientists teaching me and nurturing me. And I was very pleased that my lab work led to being awarded several prizes within the Institute of Cancer Research nationally and also internationally. And this really spurred me on to continue. Towards the end of my medical oncology training, I came to a crossroad about whether to be lab-based primarily or more clinically focused, seeing patients, as well as choosing a speciality. And it was clear to me that I ultimately enjoyed seeing patients, having that face-to-face interaction, being part of their management pathway throughout their care. In terms of speciality, I felt that at that time there had been so much progress in breast cancer, so much research, so many advances, but unfortunately this wasn't the case for all women's cancers, well, at least not to the same degree. And I felt that in my career lifetime, that I could make more of a difference to women with gynecological cancers through research, through clinical trials and caring for them in clinical practice.
I loved something that you shared with me when we spoke recently, when you said that your work isn't a job for you, it's a vocation. I'm interested to understand more about that sense of purpose for you and how that translates into your sort of into your work.
Well, thank you. I hope what you ask is a really important question, because I often question myself, because as well as work, I'm a wife, I'm a mother to a 5-year-old, I'm a sister, I'm a child to my mother, and we need to balance that work-life balance that all of us in whatever field we do, that we need to question from time to time. it is that, it's part of me. It is a large chunk of my my life, my drive. It makes me who I am. And I'm very fortunate that my family are very supportive of that, and my friends. I think that's what's really needed. It's actually the patients that drive me and make this a vocation rather than a day-to-day job. Hearing from patients like yourself, seeing patients day to day, seeing the difference that we can make. Unfortunately, it's not always positive for all patients in terms of the outcomes, but it's being there and trying to help throughout the journey. And it's about working in a team. So I've been very fortunate at the Royal Marsden to work with excellent team, multidisciplinary team, doctors, the nurses, the support workers, all together, and that drives me day to day. The other main thing, and it's that I truly believe that in my lifetime we can make high strides in improving outcomes for women with ovarian cancer and other gynecological cancers. Why do I see this? Why do I say it? Well, I've seen it. We've seen progress with use of targeted therapies such as bevacizumab or Avastin and PARP inhibitors over the last decade alone, not only in relapse disease, but also in newly diagnosed patients. And also other treatments beyond ovarian cancer as gynecological cancers.
You do a huge amount of work with not only patients directly, but also in the research space. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about some of the research that you've got underway at the moment.
The good news is that there is a lot more going on than, say, 5-10 years ago. And so it's great times. What I'd like to highlight, even within gynecological cancers, within ovarian cancer, up until recently, there's not been enough research in rarer forms of ovarian cancer. And the reason why that's important is that the mainstay treatments, so carboplatin and paclitaxel, that patients with ovarian cancer receive are not as effective as we'd like them to be in some rarer forms of ovarian cancer, such as clear cell carcinoma or indeed low-grade serous ovarian carcinoma. So there are two particular trials that I'd like to mention. The first is in low-grade serous ovarian cancer. So it's been exciting times recently because unfortunately the activity of chemotherapy in relapse disease, for example, isn't as good as we'd like it to be. We also do use anti-estrogen therapy, for example, commonly used in breast cancer, like letrozole and anastrozole and tamoxifen. But more recently, a class of drugs called MEK inhibitors has shown great promise. And in particular, an early phase clinical trial called the FRAME study, that's an academic Institute of Cancer Research and Royal Marsden sponsored trial led by my colleague Professor Susana Banerjee on the drug development unit, and we're participating on the gynae unit. It's shown really encouraging results. Based on these really encouraging results, we've developed a larger phase 2 clinical trial exploring non-chemotherapy treatment. So it's a targeted therapy approach of a drug which attacks two molecules, really, a RAF-MEK inhibitor, in combination, as well as alone, with a type of drug called a FAK inhibitor. And the trial is open. It's opened in the US, and it's due to open in the UK, as well as other countries, including France, Spain, Belgium, Italy, and hopefully Canada. So it's a global effort, and that's needed in rare cancers in particular, so that we can actually get answers quickly in a time frame for patients which are meaningful, who may currently have the disease. So I'm really optimistic that this could change the treatment options for women with low-grade serous ovarian cancer. So the other trial I'd like to highlight is a trial called ATARI. That's an academic Institute of Cancer Research sponsored international trial based on lab work from my colleagues at the Institute of Cancer Research. And it's focused on clear cell carcinoma of ovarian and also endometrial cancer. The idea is behind a weakness of cancer cells that have an abnormality in a gene called ARID1A. And it's using, again, a non-chemotherapy approach, using a new targeted therapy called an ATR inhibitor. And that attacks the DNA damage response pathway. And we're looking at this alone and also in combination with PARP inhibitors, so a drug called olaparib, and it's according to the patient's molecular profile. So that's open in the UK, and we're about to launch in France and Canada. So it's a very exciting time.
You touch on it, you have not only a really busy work life, but also family life as well. And I'd love to hear more about what a typical week looks like for you.
In short, it's manically busy. In oncology, you're always learning. You don't just finish, medical school or get your specialty certificate. As a consultant, you are learning, and you're at the forefront of advances. You're learning, you're teaching, and it's a symbiotic relationship. In terms of my day-to-day practice, I work solely at the Royal Marsden. I have an NHS practice. I also have a private practice. I have outpatients as well as inpatients. Mm-hmm. A significant proportion of my time outside of day-to-day managing patients is dedicated to developing and participating in clinical trials, as well as collaborating with scientific colleagues working in laboratories. So trying to push forward, taking the research findings from labs, and then along that journey into clinical trials, working with colleagues specialising in early phase drug development, and then on to the next phases, phase 2 and phase 3 trials. I also collaborate with pharmaceutical companies who are developing these drugs so we can get this to the patients as soon as possible. Mm. So I also think it's really important. I'm very passionate about training future oncologists because we need to have that generational ability to have the best oncologists worldwide treating patients with cancer. So I'm part of groups, and not only do I train registrars and junior doctors in our hospital, but also doctors for higher degrees, and also allied healthcare professionals and nurses, supporting them in terms of higher degrees such as MDs or PhDs. And I also train and help and teach with lectures internationally, groups within the UK or Europe, but really looking at also Asia, Latin America, and other countries that may not have the opportunities in gynecological cancer so far. So it's really important to share our learnings.
It's been so great hearing what you've had to say today, particularly in the research space. And as a woman with low-grade serous ovarian cancer, that gives me a huge amount of optimism. What gives you the greatest optimism when it comes to the fight against ovarian cancer?
I think it's seeing firsthand the progress to date in ovarian cancer. Of course, we need to be faster, but we really are. In the last few years, it's been exciting times. As I said before, not only in recurrent disease, but earlier on in the patient's journey of the diagnosis of cancer. So when I joined the team, as I said, in 2003, I remember being in clinic and there were only like 2 lines of therapy effectively. But now I'm seeing women living longer, having more lines of therapy, and importantly, having a degree of good quality of life. There may be times where patients, unfortunately, are more symptomatic, but there's also times when they may be cancer-free or cancer under control, and they may be treatment-free or on a maintenance strategy of a treatment to try and keep the cancer under control for longer. So it's really important to focus on the quality of life. The new technologies that we have now is really making this process quicker and more likely to be successful. Of course, we need to prevent these devastating cancers. We need to cure more women. And I really hope that when my daughter grows up, as I said, she's 5 years old, but I hope that she can grow up in a world that's free of the fear of cancer.